Well, we are now on chapter 9 of the book Letters for the Ages, the Ramban Nachmanides. In chapter 9, he begins to develop the idea of energizing or channeling your energy. And obviously, this is based upon this sense, which we will take a look at right now. And it is in this sense of humility which reminds you of the one before whom you will be called for judgment, the King of Glory. Channeling the energy is making that idea present. The statement is also based upon the words of Akavya ben Mechalel, who cited in the Mishnah above, in Pirkei Avot chapter 3 verse 1, who concludes his list of deterrents to sin with this advice. Remember before whom you are destined to be summoned for judgment and accounting, and before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He. The Vilna Gaon questions why this Tana repeats himself by using two terms to describe the final reckoning. First, din, which means judgment, and heshbon, which means an accounting. He explained that the judgment is rendered for a sinful act which was actually committed, while accounting is an additional reckoning that will be made of a positive deed which could have been accomplished with energy used to sin. One will be called to task not only for the sin itself, but for the tragic misuse of his precious time and energy. It was in this way that Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, who once chastised a man who physically attacked his neighbor, and the rabbi informed the ruffian that he had committed two sins. First, you struck and harmed a fellow human being. Oh my gosh. Does the world need to hear this and learn of this principle? You're not supposed to harm a fellow human being. Today's world is so far away from these principles because they have no Torah. The second, the energy you spent to accomplish this crime could have been used constructively. This is a waste and it's a grave offense as well. Laundering the royal robes, as it were. Rabbi Chaim of Volotzin, in Ruach Chaim Avot, chapter 3, verse 1, cites Shabbat 125b, which represents a parable of a king who lent his garb to two groups of men. One group carelessly returned the clothes to the king soiled, battered, and tarnished. The wise men, however, gave everything back in better condition than they received it. The royal robes were laundered and sparkling white, regalia polished and dazzling shine. The Talmud concludes that God too lends every human being a fragment of his glory, a celestial soul as it were, and fools sully their souls with blemishes of transgressions, while the wise polish them with mitzvahs, which is commandments or deeds of the Torah. On the day of reckoning, transgressors will be summoned to judgment for tarnishing their divine soul, and will be subject to an accounting for failing to enhance them. There is a twofold effect. The Beit Halevi, Parshat Noach, observes a twofold effect in every sin. Number one, wrongdoing both defiles a man and exerts an influence on others who are led to follow the example of the transgressors. This is especially true of one who enjoys a position of prestige. If he acts scrupulously, his example is a shining one. Yet if he corrupts his position, who can tell how many multitudes are led astray by his influence? Indeed, the effect of one man's wrongdoing is limited to the present. It continues in the future as well. His children and his grandchildren learn from him also. It is in this indirect yet wide-ranging influence of sin which is also brought to judgment on the day of the final accounting. And here we find that becomes part of the effect. Picturing the day of judgment, Mesilat Yesharim, chapter 23, vividly illustrates the advice that Akavya ben Mechalel to remember the day of judgment. One should paint a sharp mental picture of what he will experience after death, when he is presented to the heavenly courts for judgment. In the view of the celestial legion, the defendants will stand in front of the King of Kings, the ultimate source of sanctity and purity. The Almighty is surrounded by ministering angels or messengers who carry out his wishes with absolute perfection. He, the defendant, will stand and exposed to the intense scrutiny. Imagine, not even one thought will be absent before judgment. Painfully aware of the worst of his actions, overwhelmed, will the defendant be able to raise his head? Will he dare open his mouth? If the court shall ask, have you lost your tongue? Where is the honor and glory that you have prided yourself in your lifetime? What shall he answer? How can anyone respond to this rebuke? If one, for even one moment, form a true and forceful impression of idea, his pride would take flight from him and never return. Silent witness. The Talmud in Ta'anis describe how evidence will be presented to the heavenly tribunal for the final moment. One who thinks I can sin in privacy of my home, who will testify against me, is mistaken. The very stone wall, wooden beam, which now conceals, will cry out later and condemn his hidden sins, and indeed, a person's own soul, which resides within him, and bear witness of his wrongdoing. As one passes on to eternal rest, the deeds he performs throughout his lifetime will proceed on his last journey. When the courts issue its verdict, the one who is overwhelmed with sin will have no other choice but to attach his signature to the written confession and humbly accept the sentence, saying, the verdict is indeed true and just. Baruch Hadayin Ha'emet. And if you're listening to the dogs, it's because my wife just arrived. Shalom, shalom.